Hi, Leon from Inflation Support Services here, and welcome to this intuitive chat on exploring your vibe attracts your tribe, and even looking at it from a trauma perspective. When we can look at things from different perspectives, it means that we're not so much stuck in our way of looking at something, and we can broaden our horizon to different things. Your vibe attracts your tribe can be interpreted in many different ways. But normally it's interpreted in if you raise your vibrational level or your emotional state, then if you're a high vibing person, then you're going to attract high vibing people around you. And there is merit to that, and there's also probably a little bit more that needs to be explored that goes beyond like a catchphrase sort of thing, like your vibe attracts your tribe. And it's very easy to say. If we dissect, for example, raise your vibrational level. A level system kind of gets into a hierarchical system, like those below and those above sort of thing, which I'm never too comfortable with, because it took the below for the above to happen. And it takes the above for the below to be aware of that sort of thing. It coexists together. There's no separation in that. But when we look at raising, for example, raising can be interpreted in many different ways, both positive and probably a perceived negative. When we raise something or rise something up, or we're lifting it, it's like, I'm going to rise this up, I'm going to rise my emotional state, I'm raising it up. So it's almost like a going up in levels, a jumping on the elevator and being risen up, almost stationary in that sort of thing. It can be interpreted that way, just rising up. We've got raise, and raise can be like, you leave bread to raise, you got to allow it to raise up, or the yeast and all that, you got to allow it to fluff up. Or you could look at it as, I'm raising children, or I'm raising a seedling. It's in that development process. It's learning, it's growing, and it's raising. It's rising as it raises. You're raising a child to an adult. So it's almost a developmental process to rise an emotional state. And as we go through different maturity states, different awarenesses of just ourselves and the world around, sometimes our emotional state will change given our environment as well. We're not separate to that as well. It could be seen as a perceived negative or a perceived positive, depending on your point of view, where raising something can be a form of destruction. I shall raise this house to the very ground. I shall raise it from its foundations. I shall destroy it all. And that could be seen as destruction. I don't want my house destroyed. Please don't raise my house to the ground. Or it could be seen as like, I'm destroying something to start anew. And sometimes in a healing journey is what is our old emotional state that was holding us back, was limiting us. Sometimes there is a little self-destruction in that, or a transformation or an integration to becoming a different emotional state, you could say a vibrational state. Now, vibration in itself is not a static thing. It vibrates, it's vibrating. Even our emotional state vibrates. We go from happy, sad, angry, happy again, all these sorts of different emotions. Sometimes we just feel a bit blah, and we don't know how we feel. But the actual vibration, if you pluck a guitar string, for example, it goes up and down. So similar to emotions, we'd be happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad, angry, all these sorts of different emotions. So we're fluctuating like a wave for vibration, for a reverberation of sound to emit from a guitar string or whatever it is, or drum, or it needs that emittance from the vibration. You could go from an atom level or a proton level, that shake around sort of thing. All these sorts of things where there's a vibration to it. When we get nervous, we shake. We're going backwards and forwards with our bodily emotions as our body tries to regulate the stress within our body to get a harmony once again, to discharge that trauma. So a vibration in itself is dependent on being up and down. So what we're rising, or if we're lifting up in a level system, what we're rising has to be dependent on going up and down at the same time. So your level system is also going to go up and down dependent on the weight or the importance upon some of these emotions, or the attachment to, or getting caught up in, or getting stuck in some of the happy emotions, the sad emotions, the angry emotions, and how your vibe is at that time is going to also be reflected on those around you. And those around you, you're not separate to your environment. A simple explanation of this is either, like we're in winter at the moment, go out into the cold and see if you can be separate to. It's like, oh, I do the Wim Hof method. It's like, but the Wim Hof method is not about numbing yourself to the cold. It's just being more, I guess, having an emotional resilience to it, to know the stress and to be able to be adapted to it. Or go into the heat and you start sweating. The environment is affecting the body. Or you could go into a workplace and have a very stressful workplace, very stressful. You could have great work colleagues, but not so great customers, or not so great customers, and you could have not so great colleagues, or a mix of both, which creates a high stress environment. That's your tribe at that time that you have to go to earn the money to survive. Or it could be within the home environment. You could be similar to how I said in the emotional manipulation. My body was getting tense when I knew that my ex-wife was coming home because it was preparing for the fight. So sometimes the environment is what we're attracted to, though, because given how we were raised on a developmental process, on an emotional process, we attract to that. We attract similar to people that are familiar to our prior environment. So if we're raised in dangerous environments, we might see those dangerous environments as normal. Now, that might not seem normal, but when you think about what's normal to you and you have a conversation with someone else and they're like having differences of opinions, differences of views, it's like it's slightly different to their normal. How you were raised in your tribe, your community of people, or family, or workplace, or social situation will affect your vibe. And sometimes if we start to gain an awareness sometimes that when we step out of that tribe, how we're perceived within that little closed unit of tribe of people with their belief systems, their set of rules, their how they practice their way of life might be different to how you're perceived outside of that. You might be perceived as a good person or a person of worth. Within that tribe, your role is not to be of worth. So you've got this fluctuating once again of like, people perceive me well over here, people within my immediate tribe don't perceive me well. So we have a fluctuation, positive and negative. We could also say that how we hold our body when we go out into the world, where bad things always seem to happen to me, or decisions I make never lead to good outcomes, and I'm the fault of that. When we also gain an awareness of our own emotional state, our own emotional awareness, we can start to see that, hey, maybe when I was tensing up because I was scared of, like, my body was starting to protect itself, that tension now carries out into the world. And if I was holding my body in certain ways of like protective ways, defensive ways from harm, but it was affecting my physical state, it was affecting my, like how I was saying, it's like I was conditioned not to have confidence of things. Like Dion doesn't have confidence. It's like became a mantra by the supporting people around me, where you go out into the world hunched over, perceived as being like physically weak, you're uncertain sort of thing. You're now looking like wounded prey based upon how you were raised and your emotional development, your conditioning within that. You're carrying that now out, where you're looking like wounded prey to people that like to prey upon the perceived weak. And I say perceived weak because we're not weak, we're just being conditioned to be that way, when we're actually very strong people considering what we've been through. It's just when we've got a belief system that says you're of no worth, and that's within your tribe of what you've been raised emotionally, we sometimes know no different. It's like, I don't know how to speak Cantonese. I want to speak Cantonese because it will help me with the Taoism, but because I don't know of something, I can't actually do it until I actually learn to develop those skills, learn to develop those emotional skills, those tools to say, hey, boundaries, sorts of things, I am of worth, it's okay to love myself, it's okay to have my own sort of values separate to what I've been conditioned to within that tribe. When I'm carrying myself in that way, bad things will happen, sort of thing. So, or I might adopt certain ways, like I always got to make sure my door's locked, sort of thing. It's like I've got to make sure everything's in its place. Or it's like almost getting towards like what people would say would be obsessive compulsive disorder. But in that way, it's like I've really got to control my environment because of the fear of being attacked once again. It's like if I really make sure my door's locked, then everything inside is safe and I have a safe place to return to. Even though kind of the MO of a burglar is the well prepared for broken locked doors sort of thing. It's like they're normally breaking in. So it's a perceived safety. Now, that perceived safety is how I'm actually living in my environment. I'm living in a survival mode. I'm perceiving threats to making sure that I'm safe in that, because the body, like we might have times of wanting to check out, but the body wants to check in. It wants to keep us going. It's surviving. If we're in a survival state, we can either be perceived as a threat or we could be perceiving everything else as a threat, which would then, the tribe around us becomes unsafe, but it's also not separate to the tribe that also conditioned in that that feeling of unsafety. What are we to do with raising our vibration in that state? Well, in EFT tapping, for example, we're interrupting that fear response, that survival response between the amygdala and the hippocampus. So the part of the brain that's responsible for perceiving threat, we're starting to de-stress that, down-regulate it to the part of the brain that has all those memories of all those bad experiences. And normally when we look back on our past, it's not like, oh yeah, I remember all the great stuff, it's all the happy stuff. It's like, that's not where our mind normally goes to. It normally goes to, oh yeah, that bad stuff happened, that bad, oh, and that. So it's normally like that part of the brain that's going, okay, well, these are the bad experiences that have happened in the past, and this is how I'm going to keep safe from it, or at least try to keep safe. Like with EMDR sort of thing, staying within that window of tolerance that we can work with, and also starting to discharge the energy within that body, that traumatic energy that is perceiving the world as a threat. So if anything, we're going into what would be the emotions that people don't want to focus on, because we want to focus on the positive. We really want to raise that vibrational level so I don't have to feel all what's down below. But what's down below normally is what will make up top a little bit more livable. And what I mean by that is when we start to address those emotions that hold us back, that create that tension within our lives, that create that fear, then focusing on the positive becomes less of a tension within the body, because when we focus, we need to bring focus, attention to something. We need to focus on something. It's almost a conscious effort. But a lot of the trauma, a lot of the fear, a lot of the what you would say would be irrational, because our logical mind is the rational part of the mind, happens on the unconscious or subconscious, or the survival part of the brain, the limbic area, that emotional part of the brain. And if it's in the emotional part of the brain, that's the part that we want to rise up or raise up. And that can be a process, a developmental process to undo the harm that was done. So when we're undoing the harm that was done, it's similar to releasing the binds of what has been constricting us. And once we release that, we tend to feel a bit more freer. And in that freer emotional state, things naturally rise of themselves. You don't have to focus on bread for the bread to rise. You don't have to focus on a seedling for it to naturally develop, because that takes a lot of time and energy and conscious attention. Doing something where we're clearing something at an unconscious level naturally switches off that survival state to where, the world is not a scary place because I don't feel so scared from within. It's like that scary thing that happened to me. I've now processed it. It's come to an end. And lo and behold, I feel an expansion within myself. I feel relaxed. I feel relieved. And when I'm in this state, a lot more creativity, a lot more welcoming of the world happens of itself. There's no need to consciously mantra into our brain, similar to how I had no confidence mantraed into my brain. The knowing and belief within ourselves, that capacity, that emotional resilience that is built, starts to vibrate a little bit stronger, because now we're feeling really good in ourselves. We're feeling great. We'll feel crap, but we know that we can go through that and come out the other side, because we've definitely been through a lot worse. And we've come through that. It's found its completion, and now it's vibrating a little bit more. And it's kind of like we feel a bit looser when we feel less tense. We feel a lot less on guard. And anything where, if you're playing a piano, if you're playing a guitar, the more you focus on, it's like, I'm not doing this right, or it's like other people are better at it than me, or it's like, to the point where the more you raise that development of learning and just practicing to where you no longer actually think about it, it just becomes naturally. You can just naturally play that piano. You can sit down at the keys. You're not like, oh, well, this is C key and I need to push it this way. Where do I put my pinky, sort of thing? You're naturally doing it. So it becomes a natural flowing process of less restriction of walls of fear or perceived threats, or how I'm holding myself based upon old programming of my belief systems of how to do things based upon money concerns, all this sort of thing. I'm now allowing myself to explore more opportunities. When we do that, we explore more of ourselves and more of the world without a lot of that unconscious fear that's holding us back, is restricting us. But that takes time, it takes process. Like at EFT, I can't guarantee how many sessions it is, because it's dependent upon your past experiences. It could be quick, it could be very long term. But within EFT tapping, there is what's known as the apex effect. So apex effect is an inverted triangle. The source of the problem, the root of the problem that's been creating this misshapen plant, we take care of it at the root, and it naturally just flows out. And normally when you're doing that, you're not even consciously aware that what used to hold you back, you're now doing, because that charge, that fear has relaxed. And if you feel good, if everything feels good, everyone around you is feeling at ease, then you're most likely to naturally attract those that want to be around that. A tribe also has to be responsible for the raising of the individual. So there's going to be people in the tribe that go up and down. There's going to be people that have happy moments. And similar as you're there for them, they are there for you. And that's when sometimes you know who your true friends are and who are there to actually hold you down, which gets into the raising of a destructive thing. So sometimes when we're raising our emotional state, our almost an emotional maturity, a maturity where it's kind of like an unfolding of a flower, where we're not, I'm more mature than you sort of thing. It's a natural process, a natural development. Sometimes that can be perceived as a threat to other people that really had you as that source of supply. And sometimes it just means that the tribe that was around us, we perceive that now as, well, I don't want to be around this anymore, because it doesn't actually make my emotional state, my emotional vibration feel too good. I don't really want to put harm on what was already harmful. I want to go with the flow somewhere else. So sometimes in a recovery journey or an emotional raising up of something, there means destructions of relationships, family environments that were not too good, and wanting to be around people that do in a way lift you up, that lift you up in a challenging way. because there's lifting up where it's just a yes man thing. It's like everyone disagrees with what you're saying, or you're just joining in on an agreeable circle, or you want something that positively challenges you, where they want the best for you by still also challenging what's not best for you by some old belief systems that are still processing away in the background. So sometimes something as simple as a catchphrase, there's a lot more behind it. It's like me saying, oh, I've got depression. Well, just be more positive. Now, that is the end goal of what we do want out of depression, but there's a lot of process, there's a lot of understanding, and a lot of hardship that actually goes into going from a low state to a high state. But I also only know the high state because of the low state, and the low state is dependent upon the high state, and the high state is dependent on the low state, because you can't know the one without the other. How can you know even more happiness without having less happiness? So the two go together. Knowing the opposite of things is very helpful, because we also know of treatment that we do deserve and treatment that we don't deserve. We know what is a boundary violation and what isn't a boundary violation. We start to learn what is a threat and what is not a threat. So it's sometimes good to know of the opposites of each other, but it's also good not to go to in extremes of one or the other all the time, because that still might be in that raising emotional development process. I'm Dion from Evolution Support Services, and I do offer EFT tapping online to help shed the load. And if you think of shedding the load and an air balloon floating away, it's kind of like that. The air balloon doesn't have to focus on floating away, it just naturally rises up. So yeah, I'm Dion from Evolution Support Services, and I'll catch you in the next chat. Bye for now.